Welcome to Tough Talk.
Thanks,
Tough
Sean.
Talk, yeah, of course. Tough Talk is an interview series where we ask smart people tough questions. Tough questions about a career and growth, tough questions about professional growth, um, and I think more importantly, tough questions about working at a fast-growing company. And couldn't be more thrilled to chat with you today.
Happy to chat.
My very first question. So you're the founder at Framework, a position you've had for 2.5 years now. But before, obviously, held positions at Apple and Facebook and Oculus. I'm curious, was there like a specific moment for you when you decided it was time to start your own business? Anything in particular kind of stand out?
Yeah, sure. I'd say that the most proximate thing was vesting out at Facebook, but really it was, being part of early Oculus and being able to move extremely quickly with a team that we all believed in the same mission, and we all, there's no bureaucracy. It was really just a matter of like there's blank space all around us. We needed to explore what to do in VR, and we were able to just iterate extremely quickly and get results out into the world, and especially audiences who are willing to experiment with us. And as we matured and grew into a bigger company, of course, went through an acquisition. We
Mhm.
really slowed ourselves down pretty substantially. We took fewer risks. We iterated a lot slower, and there are trade-offs, of course, too, that we could build, more refined and mature products. But VR is such a still, even today, nascent space. We lost a lot by not being able to iterate quickly. Um,
Mhm.
and I knew that, being able to go back and create a small team, and pull together people who are aligned to a worthwhile mission and being able to get back into that very quick iteration and execution mode is the working model that I personally want to work in. But also, the mission that we have in Framework of basically remaking consumer electronics to be better for people and the planet was just too important for me to do anything else but that.
Talk to me about the small teams, because even from Oculus, like going from one to then a team of 90 or Framework, as you grow your team, what would you say are characteristics that you look for in kind of initial hires on a small team?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I joined Oculus, I was the eighth person in, and it was really the team there was just really well rounded in terms of backgrounds and skill sets.
Mhm.
We had just like because we were doing such a deeply cross functional thing that was a combination of science and software engineering and graphics and hardware engineering and manufacturing and so on. It's like we had people with different expertise in different areas. But the magic comes in where everyone kind of bridges across their backgrounds and their functions and figures out how to build the thing that depends on all of them. And so that's what we look for in Framework as well, is really thinking about how do we get people who are extremely deep at the thing that they're great at, but broad enough to connect to everyone else. And especially more than anything, interested in connecting with other functions and like collaboratively solving some of these challenging problems.
Mhm. Mhm. And when you started Framework, did you raise any capital? And kind of what was the process like for that?
Yeah, sure. So, I was fortunate enough from the Oculus and Facebook experience to be able to self fund the company through the first year basically of being able to do effectively stealth mode iteration quickly with a small team without needing to go and sort of slow down or reallocate my own time and energy to fundraising to basically convince people that this thing that we're doing was, not just important, but actually even possible to do. And so
Hmm.
instead, we were able to spend that first year actually proving that it was possible by building functioning product and then being able to take that and go in front of investors and even for that the in our seed round is really mostly other folks from Oculus from the founding team who of course are successful from that exit who mostly were putting their trust in me regardless of what we're working on, but of course also believe in our mission.
Was this the first time you self-funded a company or project?
Yeah, sure. I guess aside from like hobby projects that don't don't take much more than I guess like pizza money to do.
Did did it change the way that you think about resourcing at all? You know, it being self-funded.
Yeah, sure. I guess so in that regard, it's not that different from the early days of Oculus, where we were just super efficient out of necessity, and maybe less actually from you know, funding or monetary necessity, and more just like opportunity cost, the amount of time and brain power that we have available. You can't, you just have to be able to close the loop quickly on being able to get, you know, a response on the thing that you've built. Otherwise, you know, if it's open ended and you're just heading down a path without knowing if it's really working or not, you know, that's just such a massive opportunity cost challenge.
I read on kind of like speaking of closing the loop. I'm curious if this is like a piece of that strategy, but I read on LinkedIn, occasionally you'll jump into just the support chat for Framework, maybe out of necessity or resources, but also likely to learn. Um, is there a reason that you do that, jumping into the support chat?
Yeah, I mean, it really is that. It's a combination of necessity and just actual interest. You know, it's great to understand at that direct level how people are using the product, what issues they're running into, what we need to do to resolve it. And of course, you know, since then we've been able to build a really strong customer experience team, and you know, they can distill trends down into like specific highlights to bring to the rest of the team. But it's still good to occasionally jump in there and even just see the direct feedback.
Hmm. I remember when when you reached out to Tough, I feel like the whole team kind of had like a ooh, this is really cool. Um, Also, growth seems like a challenge. And I remember before we emailed you back, reading a Forbes article where you talked about acknowledging it's a competitive, kind of tricky space. But one of the things we have going for us is focus. And there's something about that that really resonated, kind of identifying your focus and keeping the blinders on around that. What is there anything in particular that made you feel really confident that you picked the right focus?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things about the PC space, especially, you know, is that aside from Apple, every company we're competing with, they're not they're not really well loved as brands, and part of that is that the products that they're building don't feel like, as an end consumer, they don't feel like they have that level of care and love put into them. In part because the product portfolios are just so broad. You know, these are not
Mm,
companies like Apple where there are, you know, literally three notebooks in the entire portfolio, and there is, you know, a deep level of care that goes into each one of them. These are
mhm,
companies that are building literally, you know, dozens of different models a year just to, you know, bump different specs or make minor modifications and shove them out into the world. And so, you know, I felt very, very confident going into this with a single team and product focused on solving a specific problem and being able to put in, you know, the requisite level of care into it, that we'd be able to build something that connects with the audiences that we're targeting.
mhm. Speaking of connecting with audiences, I mean, from Tufts' perspective, I think a lot of people's when you look at reviews and kind of just the conversations about framework, it's impressive, and it feels like a really kind of incredible consumer electronics brand. Do you have an electronics brand that you admire most?
Yeah, sure. There's a few that I like.
Mm,
I think, you know, for a lot of folks in consumer electronics, teenage engineering is held up as an interesting example. You know, I like, as actual products, they're like clearly not for everyone, but they're playful in ways that consumer electronics just hasn't been for, you know, for a long period of time. Like they are objects that you actually do, you know, feel a level of like, I don't know, passion and pride over in a way that, you know,
mhm,
sort of the generically designed box doesn't, while still actually being like good functional products, which is just fun. You know, it's sort of, again, it's like elevating the consumer electronics object from being, you know, this sort of like throwaway object that like temporarily solves a task, to being something that you like care about and want to have, you know, prominently placed like in front of you, to, you know, even just like look at occasionally.
mhm, mhm. Cool. And we got two more questions for you. The first one is kind of, I'm curious. As a remote team, at least at Tough, we think a lot about, especially this time of the year, um, about avoiding burnout. Is that something that's ever come up for you or the team at Framework? And is there anything you do like during your week intentionally to recharge?
Yeah, sure. One thing we have done pretty deliberately is we actually do a 9-day work week. So we do every other week, we do
Mm,
a day off. And it's sort of like really acknowledging the reality that the days that we are working, we're all working much longer than we should be, and allowing for there to be like just this built into our schedule time to like actually go and decompress. That's not just the weekend where you barely have time to unpack your mind. It's
hmm
been working really well for us. And so that's sort of what we've been doing, is just sort of like acknowledging the reality that we're all putting in a lot of time and just deliberately making or putting everyone in a place where they have some extended time to decompress.
There's something about acknowledging it that feels powerful. That the investment that you're making from a time perspective matters, and calling it out. Do you, from a customer support perspective, do you rotate who covers support on that day off, or do you just not do you not have anybody doing it?
Yeah, we kind of like jump in a little bit on that day. We do also have like an external partner that now we're bringing up to be able to do
Mm,
like basically first or second tier quick responses. Being able to solve the most common problems. But then when we have escalations, then it still turns back into like jump in for the escalations that we really want to solve quickly. But also also communicate when we respond to consumers that like our support schedule is basically our working days, and when like weekend
mm,
responses are not necessarily going to come in.
hmm Last thing I have for you, 2021 is coming to an end. Is there one or two things you've learned this year that you're excited to take into 2022?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
The
um
meaty one.
yeah, sure. I think when we designed this product, like we were really deliberate about audience sequencing, knowing that
Mm,
we were building a long lasting product. We're building an ecosystem that's designed to last much longer than a notebook normally would. And so we've like physically, in terms of like what the product is capable of, what it looks like, what it feels like, we've designed it to work for a very broad range of audiences. But at the same time, for this early phase and launching it into the world, we knew that for the most part, we're really going to be connecting to enthusiasts and people who sort of immediately understand this concept of consumer electronics being modular and upgradable. But one of the interesting things that I've been learning is that like even with that, we've gotten a bunch of people coming to us from audiences we just didn't expect to see this early. So
mm,
businesses and schools and consumers who have never been inside of a PC before, but who just love the concept of what we're doing. And so that's something that now we're really carrying forward into 2022, thinking about like some of these audiences are coming to us much earlier than we expected. How do we best support them and make sure that like the hardware that we built that is really going to work for them is also matched to all the other things that they may want from us.
hmm I imagine there's a level of prioritization too. Like out of these audiences that are coming to us earlier than we expected, which ones do we need to make sure we prioritize? Or is it kind of like you're treating all the audiences that are coming to you now equally?
Right. No, there's definitely a level of prioritization, especially as it comes to something like business versus consumer. Even just from the perspective of like how a business would normally purchase a computer, they would be, do issue a PO and get terms and do a wire transfer perhaps at the end of it. But consumer of course
hmm
is paying with a credit card or debit card.
hmm
And so even just thinking through like, well, does that mean we ask businesses to go through the consumer path and put in a credit card and have them change the way they normally buy their computers, or do we
hmm
have to build up the infrastructure to be able to support them? And then that of course would then trade off against other things that we would want to be able to do in terms of development for other consumer audiences. And so
hmm
that's like an example of like a specific trade-off that we have to consider there.
hmm I know it. I said that was my last question, but I want to follow up on that quickly. In terms of prioritizing, is there a metric? Is there a KPI? Is there something that guides your ability to think about those trade-offs and then say we're going to move down this path?
Yeah, and so we do. I think like a lot of organizations, like we kind of have the like the pyramid or like the cascading like sort of company direction that starts with like the vision and the mission and goes into like a
hmm
long-term strategy and roadmap, and then gets distilled down into OKRs that we run each half, and then gets broken down into like specific milestones and sprints that we execute on. And so it's always just making sure that like as we ladder back up through OKRs and strategy and the mission and the vision, that it's consistent, that we're not like mismatched between them or like trying to spread ourselves across everything, but really thinking through like as we ladder up that we're picking the right priorities at every stage.
Did you have the mission and vision from day one, or did that take a few months to develop?
Yeah, the core mission and vision is really something that we started the company with, really this idea of remaking consumer electronics. And then distilling that down into the specifics of the strategy and then into the specifics of the product roadmap is something that we developed pretty quickly for this first product, but it's still something that we're going to continue to develop as we expand into other product categories and more consumer and commercial audiences.
Amazing. Well, that's all I got. We're big fans of the framework team over here at Tough and appreciate you jumping on today.
Thanks, Alan.
Appreciate you.